Get away from my food. The scream shattered the stillness of the cold December night. Michael Jackson, billionaire and entrepreneur, stepped out onto his penthouse balcony, the warmth from the holiday party inside now a distant hum in the background. He glanced down to see the chaos unfolding in his pristine yard, his breath clouding in the cold night air. A young black girl, no older than 12, was struggling against his Rottweiler, Rex. The dog was circling her, teeth bared, growling menacingly as the girl fought to keep a scrap of food, what looked like a piece of ham, tightly clutched in her hands. Michael's heart skipped. What was going on? Rex, typically well-behaved, had never acted this aggressively before. The dog's posture was tense, protective, but this was no typical interaction. There was something urgent about the situation, something primal. The girl wasn't running or begging, she was standing her ground, her eyes fierce and unyielding as she fought to keep the food away from Rex. "Get away from me," she shouted again, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet night air. Michael's steps grew quicker, as he moved toward the commotion. His gaze fixed on the girl, the raw hunger in her eyes making him freeze. Her clothes were ragged, shoes barely holding together by fraying laces, and her face told a story of survival, of hardship. He hadn't even realized Rex had stopped growling until he heard the girl speak again, voice still trembling but with an edge of determination. "This is mine. I'm not giving it up." Michael's breath caught. This wasn't just some random, starving child in need of help. This was something else, something more personal than he could have imagined. "Who are you?" Michael asked, his voice sharp, authoritative, but the girl didn't flinch. She met his gaze with a defiance that took him by surprise. "Your dog's trying to steal my food," she snapped, her tone defiant and full of the kind of anger Michael hadn't expected to see from someone so young. "I'm not giving it up." Michael took another step closer, his voice faltering as he tried to make sense of the situation. "Who are you?" The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tightened her grip on the food and stepped back, eyes still fixed on him. The tension in the air was palpable. "I'm Amara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was no mistaking the steadiness in it. "I'm your niece." Michael froze. His heart seemed to stop. His niece? The words hit him like a punch. He had been so focused on his own success, his own world, that he had completely missed this, a child, his flesh and blood, and he had never even known. His mind raced as the realization started to hit. How could he not have known? How could his sister, Sarah, the one who had left him, the one he hadn't heard from in years, have a daughter and not tell him? How could he have been so wrapped up in his own life that he hadn't even considered what his family might be going through? "Your niece." Michael repeated the words, his voice shaking slightly as he tried to make sense of them. "Why didn't anyone tell me about you?" Amara didn't respond immediately. She stood there, the wind tugging at her ragged clothes, her gaze unwavering. She didn't expect sympathy. She didn't need it. "I don't need your pity," she said coldly. "I just need you to understand. Your sister abandoned me. She left me to fend for myself." Michael's heart ached. How could Sarah have done this? How could she have abandoned her own child and left her to suffer in a system designed to fail? He took a step forward, his voice strained as he asked, "Where has she been? Why didn't anyone tell me about you?" But Amara shook her head, stepping back from him. "She didn't want you to know. She didn't want anyone to know." The cold wind whipped through the yard as Michael stood there, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The girl in front of him, his niece, had been suffering, abandoned, and now she was here, demanding answers. He had failed her. He had failed to see what was right in front of him. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why fight my dog for food?" Amara didn't respond right away. She simply looked down at the scrap of food still clutched in her hands, as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I didn't know who to turn to," she said finally, her voice softer. You were the last person I thought would help me. Michael felt the weight of her words sink in. He had lived his life surrounded by wealth, surrounded by people who catered to his every need, and here was this child, standing in front of him, abandoned by the very family who should have been there for her. What would you do if you found out someone you loved was living like this? A part of you hidden away, struggling in the shadows, and you never even knew. Would you keep your distance, or would you make it right? Michael's gaze softened. Amara was his responsibility now. He couldn't ignore her. He couldn't turn away from the truth she had just revealed. He had to make things right. He had to. What would you do if you were Michael, seeing your family's painful truths for the first time? Would you turn your back or step up? Let me know where you're watching from. If you were in Michael's shoes, would you help Amara? Don't forget to subscribe to find out what happens next. Michael stood still, unsure of what to do next. His Christmas night was no longer a celebration. The perfect life he had worked so hard to build felt hollow now, shattered by the unexpected arrival of his niece. She was the last thing he had ever expected, and now she was all that mattered. The warmth from the holiday party inside was a distant memory. The laughter and the joy had faded into the background. It no longer mattered. This was real. This was his family. He stepped closer, trying again. I want to help. I want to fix this. But the words felt hollow. How could he fix something this broken? He had no answers. No plan. Amara didn't answer. She turned, taking a step toward the gate in the corner of the yard. She was walking away, leaving him to figure out what to do next. Her small frame, silhouetted by the moonlight, seemed to carry the weight of all the things left unsaid. Michael didn't move. He just stood there, watching her walk into the cold night, the distance between them growing with each step. The perfect Christmas had unraveled in seconds. The life he had built felt meaningless in the face of the harsh truth he had just learned. If you were Michael, would you have known how to help? Would you let Amara walk away or try to find her again? Comment below and let me know, and don't forget to subscribe for the remaining part of this story. The following morning, Michael couldn't shake the image of Amara from his mind. The raw look of hunger and defiance in her eyes, the desperation as she clutched the scrap of food, it all played over and over in his thoughts. He had gone to bed last night trying to make sense of what had happened, but no clarity came. Instead, all he had was confusion, guilt, and a nagging sense that he had failed as a family member, even before he knew her. He had spent his life building an empire. Everything was perfect, the business, the wealth, the house, the car, the people around him. But this? A young girl, fighting for survival in the backyard of his mansion. It didn't fit into his world, but it was his world. Or, at least, it was part of it now. He walked into his kitchen, but the warmth of the room only seemed to make the emptiness more palpable. The smells of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon were a sharp contrast to the cold, numb feeling he had inside. The air felt heavy, suffocating. He couldn't focus. How could he not have known about Amara? How had his sister, Sarah, kept this secret from him for so long? His phone buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a message from his assistant, Jake. I found something about Sarah. She's been living in isolation. Her last known address is in a small town upstate. It's been years since anyone has had contact with her, but I'll keep digging. I'll be in touch soon, ****. Michael stared at the message, his heart sinking. Why hadn't he been told this before? Why hadn't anyone reached out to him about Sarah, about Amara? There had to be a reason for the silence. A reason why no one had told him that his sister had a daughter, a reason why he had spent so many years in the dark about Amara's existence. Michael paced the kitchen, trying to breathe through the frustration. He wasn't just angry at Sarah, he was angry at himself. He had been so absorbed in his own world that he hadn't even noticed the cracks in his family. And now, the consequences were standing in front of him. I need to find answers. The words came out of his mouth before he realized he had spoken them aloud. He had to find Amara, but even more than that, he needed to find out what had happened to Sarah. His mother had barely said a word about her. In fact, it was like she had been trying to avoid talking about Sarah altogether. Michael had always known that their relationship had been strained, but to think that it had come to this, that Sarah had not only disappeared from the family, but also left her own daughter behind, was unimaginable. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, his mind set on the next step. He had to find Sarah. He had to understand what had happened. The drive was long, the car weaving through the snowy streets, but Michael barely noticed the passing scenery. His thoughts were consumed by the unsettling conversation he had had with Amara the night before. Why didn't she trust him? She had looked at him with such skepticism, almost as if she already knew he would fail her. His phone buzzed again as he drove through the small town where Sarah had last been seen. This time, it was a call from Jake. Michael, I found something more. Sarah was in and out of rehab for years. She was living in a halfway house before disappearing entirely. There's no trace of her for over a decade. But her last known contact was with a man named Marcus. I think he might be important, ***. Marcus. The name hit Michael like a ton of bricks. He had heard it before, in whispers and half-hearted mentions, but he hadn't put much stock in it. Marcus was someone from Sarah's past, a dangerous man, by all accounts, someone who had been involved in things Michael didn't want to know about. But if Marcus had anything to do with Sarah's disappearance, and Amara's fate, then Michael needed to know everything. He pulled into the town's main street and parked the car, stepping out into the quiet cold. The air was crisp, and the ground was covered in a thick layer of snow, but it didn't feel like Christmas anymore. The warmth of family and togetherness that should have been there felt distant, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. Michael made his way to a small diner at the end of the street. The old-fashioned sign creaked in the wind, the lights inside dimly flickering. He stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing as he entered. The air smelled of coffee and pancakes, but there was something about the place that felt off. People here knew things. People here had secrets. He sat at the counter, and the waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, handed him a menu. He barely looked at it. I'm looking for someone, he said, his voice low. A woman named Sarah. She lived here years ago. Do you know her? The waitress paused, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face softened, and she glanced around the room, as if making sure no one was listening. Sarah, huh? She said slowly. She wasn't from around here, but she came through a lot. She was troubled, I'll say that much. She left, and we never saw her again. But she had a daughter. A little girl named Amara, right? Michael's heart skipped. Amara? He wasn't sure if he should be relieved or more confused. Do you know where she went? The waitress shook her head. Last I heard, Sarah left the girl with someone else. I don't know who. She wasn't the kind of person to keep in touch. But you're right to be looking for her. The girl's been through a lot. I have to find her, Michael said, his voice tense with urgency. I need to know what happened to her, what happened to my sister. She sighed, leaning on the counter. You won't find much here. Marcus, he's the one you need to talk to. He's got a lot of ties in this town. Some people say he's the reason Sarah left in the first place. Michael's blood ran cold. Marcus. Where can I find him? Michael asked, his voice urgent. The waitress hesitated, glancing around again. I don't know. But I know where he used to hang out. It's on the outskirts of town, by the old mill. But you should be careful. People like him don't take kindly to outsiders. What would you do if you were Michael, chasing down a dangerous man from your family's past, trying to uncover the truth? Would you go after Marcus, or keep searching for Amara? Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to find out what happens next. Michael's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was incomplete, and the darkness surrounding Marcus was only growing. What if finding Marcus was the key to understanding everything? But what if Marcus wasn't just a man from Sarah's past? What if he was something worse? Michael paid for his coffee and stood, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his chest. The road ahead was murky, filled with uncertainty, but it was the only one left to take. He had to find Marcus. He had to find the truth. The air was thick with unease as Michael navigated the narrow streets of the town. The diner, where he had learned so much more than he had anticipated, was now a distant memory in his rearview mirror. His mind was full of questions, all of them tangled together: Sarah's disappearance, Amara's fight for survival, and now Marcus. A name he couldn't shake. The old mill, where the waitress had told him Marcus might be found, loomed ahead as Michael's car slowed to a crawl. The once thriving industrial hub had long since fallen into decay. Tall, rusted structures stood like silent sentinels, reminding Michael of a time when people were trying to escape their past, rather than face it. This town, this place, held memories. Not just of the past, but of the secrets that had been buried. Sarah had come from here. And now, it seemed, Michael had to confront everything that had been hidden for so long. As he approached the mill, Michael couldn't shake the unease growing in his chest. It wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about confronting the truth about his sister, about Amara, and about Marcus. He parked a little further down the road, the car's engine idling as he sat in the darkness. The streetlights were dim, casting long shadows across the broken concrete. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Michael had spent years building an empire, securing a future for himself, but now he was fighting a battle he never expected to face. He stepped out of the car, the cold night air biting into his skin. The path leading to the mill was overgrown with weeds, a sign of how long it had been since anyone had cared. Michael's footsteps echoed through the stillness as he walked toward the rusted gates. What was Marcus's connection to all this? What had he done to Sarah, and to Amara? Just as he was about to reach the gates, a shadow moved in front of him. A figure, tall and menacing, stepped out from behind one of the nearby buildings. Michael's heart raced as the figure approached. Looking for something? The voice was low, rough, with an edge of authority. Michael stood his ground. I'm looking for Marcus. The man's eyes narrowed, assessing him carefully. Why? I need to talk to him. Michael's voice was firm, but there was a hint of uncertainty. He didn't know what to expect, what he might be walking into, but he couldn't back down now. Not when he was so close to finding the answers. The man let out a low chuckle. You sure about that? Marcus isn't exactly the kind of guy who just sits around waiting for company. Michael's heart sank. Was Marcus dangerous? His mind raced as the man before him stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Michael had seen a lot in his life, but this man's energy, his force, was different. It felt like the kind of power you didn't challenge unless you were prepared for the consequences. The man seemed to sense Michael's hesitation and smirked. You're way out of your depth, boy. Before Michael could respond, the man reached for his jacket pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it, revealing an old, faded photo. The photo was of a younger Sarah, standing with a man Michael didn't recognize. He looked closer and realized the man was Marcus. You sure you want to find him? The man asked, holding the photo out for Michael to see. You're not gonna like what you find. Michael's pulse quickened. Where is he? The man leaned in, his face inches from Michael's. He's close. But you need to understand something. Marcus doesn't just hurt people physically. He hurts them in ways that leave scars far deeper than skin. Michael's throat tightened. He didn't want to know more, he had to. The reality of Sarah's past, of Amara's struggle, had been suffocating him, but now he had a glimpse into the darkness that had been hiding in plain sight. What happened to Sarah? Michael's voice was a whisper. Where is she? The man's expression shifted for a moment, almost imperceptibly. Sarah? She's gone. Michael stepped back, the shock of the words taking root in his chest. Gone. What did that mean? How could Sarah, his sister, just vanish without a trace? What do you mean gone? Michael demanded, his fists clenching at his sides. Where did she go? What happened to her? The man's expression softened, just slightly, and his voice dropped. You're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus is the reason she left. The reason she cut ties with you, with your family. He's the reason she couldn't stay. Michael's stomach churned. He had suspected something dark had caused Sarah to run, but hearing it aloud was different. The truth was more brutal than he could have imagined. What did he do to her? Michael's voice cracked as he asked the question, the urgency pushing him forward. He had to know. He needed to understand everything. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced around, as though making sure no one was watching. Marcus, he controlled her. He took everything from her, her will, her choices, her freedom. And when she couldn't break free, she ran. Michael stood frozen. This wasn't just about Sarah's disappearance. This was about Amara. She had been a casualty in a war Michael had never even known was being fought. And what about Amara? Michael asked. What happened to her? The man's eyes narrowed. She's not safe. Not as long as Marcus is still looking for her. Michael's mind raced. He had to find Amara. He had to protect her from whatever it was that had haunted his sister. From whatever had broken his family. But how could he face Marcus? The man who had controlled Sarah's life, who had manipulated her, who had caused all this damage. The man stepped back, giving Michael one last look before he spoke. Be careful, Michael. There are things you don't know. Things you might not want to know. But if you want to find Marcus, you need to make a choice. Michael's thoughts swirled. He had already made his choice. He would find Marcus. He would do whatever it took to protect Amara. I'll find him. Michael said, his voice cold with determination. The man didn't respond, but the look he gave Michael spoke volumes. What would you do if you found out that a man like Marcus was hunting your family? Would you fight back, or would you walk away? Let me know where you're watching from and what you think Michael should do next. Make sure you subscribe to follow the journey. Michael's steps grew heavy as he walked away, his mind now clear on one thing, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Sarah's mistakes, Marcus's manipulation, Amara's pain, none of it would hold him back. This was his family. And he was going to fix it. As he drove off, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The shadows from the mill still haunted the edge of his vision, but he didn't care anymore. He had a purpose. And he wasn't going to stop until he found Amara. The drive from the mill was unsettling, but Michael couldn't afford the luxury of time. The night had stretched long, and the cold wind seemed to follow him wherever he went. Marcus, the name echoed in his mind like a haunting whisper, every syllable heavier than the last. What was Marcus really capable of? The warnings from the man in the alley kept replaying, you're not going to like what you find. The photo of Sarah and Marcus, the glimpse into their shared past, had left a scar on Michael's mind. Sarah. His sister. The one who had abandoned everything. Had Marcus been the one to drive her away? Or had she run from him, too? And Amara. She had been left behind, tangled in this mess, and Michael was just beginning to unravel it. The car's tires hummed on the road as Michael drove toward the small address Jake had sent him. The promise of an answer, a lead that might bring him closer to Marcus, felt too distant. Was he really ready to face whatever lay ahead? The city's edge gave way to desolate streets, and then to the more abandoned outskirts. The buildings here looked like remnants of a once thriving community, old houses, broken windows, and streets that hadn't been cared for in decades. As Michael pulled up in front of a dilapidated warehouse, his gut twisted with unease. The rusted gates loomed in front of him like a warning sign. He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this wasn't just a random lead anymore. He was stepping into a trap. A place where Marcus was undoubtedly hiding, but Michael didn't have the luxury of hesitation. He had come too far. He parked the car and sat for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, before he stepped out. The cold air bit into his skin, and the sound of his footsteps echoed as he walked toward the front door. It was strange. The world outside was so quiet, yet it felt like it was bracing for something. Michael reached the door and knocked twice. The silence seemed to stretch on forever before the door creaked open. The man who greeted him wasn't Marcus, but he was just as imposing. Broad-shouldered with a hard face, his eyes scanned Michael with suspicion. "You're looking for Marcus, huh?" the man asked, his voice gruff and cold. Michael nodded. "I need to speak to him." The man's lips twitched into a smirk, but he didn't move to let Michael in. "You really think he's going to see you?" Michael held his ground. "I'm not leaving until I speak to him." There was a long pause, the tension in the air thick as the man sized Michael up. Finally, the man stepped back and gestured for him to come in. "Fine. But I'm warning you. You're not going to like what you hear." Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, and the air smelled of stale air and old wood. The building was empty except for a few crates piled in the corner, and Michael's senses were immediately on high alert. It felt wrong, like he had stepped into the wrong part of his own nightmare. "Follow me," the man ordered, leading Michael through a narrow hallway. Michael hesitated but followed. They stopped at a door at the end of the hall, where the man knocked twice before opening it. Inside, Marcus sat at a desk, his back to the door. His presence was commanding, his posture relaxed yet exuding an undeniable sense of power. The moment Michael stepped in, Marcus turned, his eyes cold and calculating. "I didn't expect company," Marcus said, his voice smooth like silk, but there was a hardness to it that sent a shiver down Michael's spine. "I need answers," Michael said, his voice tight with frustration. "Where is Sarah? What happened to her?" Marcus smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You think I'm the one who's going to give you those answers? You think I'm the reason she disappeared?" Michael clenched his fists, trying to control the anger rising inside him. He couldn't let Marcus get under his skin. "Not now. You have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" Marcus continued, his eyes gleaming with a twisted amusement. "Sarah was always running from something, someone. She could never outrun her past. And now, you're here, trying to save a little girl who never even stood a chance." Michael's heart pounded in his chest. The truth was starting to make itself clear. Sarah had been running from Marcus, running from the life that had trapped her. And Amara? She was caught in the middle, a casualty of this toxic relationship. "What did you do to her?" Michael's voice was hoarse now, a dangerous edge creeping in. Marcus leaned forward, his smile widening. "What did I do to her? Nothing. Sarah did it to herself. She chose to leave. She chose to abandon everything, including her own daughter. Amara was never part of the plan. She was just a reminder of all the mistakes Sarah couldn't face, ***. The words hit Michael like a slap. Abandoned. That word echoed in his mind, too many layers of guilt and disbelief stacked on top of each other. Sarah hadn't just left him, she had left her own daughter to fight for survival. And now, Amara had come to him for help, and all Michael had done was fail her. "Where is she, Marcus?" Michael asked, his voice strained. "Where's Sarah?" Marcus shook his head slowly, as if savoring the moment. "You want her. You want to bring her back. Fine. But you're not going to get that happily ever after you're dreaming of. Sarah's gone, and there's no coming back from that. Michael felt the weight of Marcus's words. There was something dangerous about Marcus, more than just physical strength. It was in the way he controlled everything, how easily he manipulated people's lives. And now, Michael was caught in it. What about Amara? Michael asked, his voice low, but with determination. What are you planning to do with her? Marcus's expression shifted, and for the first time, Michael saw a flicker of something darker behind his eyes. You think you can just waltz in here, act like you care, and take her away from me? Michael didn't flinch. I won't let you hurt her. Marcus stood slowly, towering over Michael. You can try. But Amara isn't yours to save. She never was. She's just another pawn in this game, and you're not going to win. What would you do if you were Michael, finding out that your family's past was more dangerous than you could ever imagine? What should he do now? Let me know where you're watching from and how you think Michael should handle this. Subscribe to stay updated on this journey. Michael stood there, the weight of Marcus's words sinking in. There was no simple solution. No easy way to fix everything. But he wasn't backing down. Amara needed him. And he wasn't going to let Marcus or anyone else stand in his way. He had no idea what the future held, but he was ready for whatever came next. Michael had been back in New York for hours, but he couldn't seem to shake the feeling that he was missing something. It was as if the answers he had been chasing were just out of reach, always a few steps ahead of him, teasing him with promises of truth that were never fully revealed. The world outside his penthouse windows was alive with the buzz of the city, lights flashing, people moving through the streets, the usual hustle of a Friday evening, but inside, Michael was caught in a storm of his own making. He sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at his phone, which sat on the coffee table like an unspoken challenge. The details Jake had sent earlier about Amara were just the beginning. There were still so many gaps, pieces of the puzzle that hadn't fallen into place. Where was she? The question burned in Michael's mind, demanding an answer. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. The weight of what had been revealed to him, about his sister, about Amara, about Marcus, felt heavier than he could bear. He thought back to his conversation with Marcus, the chilling way the man had spoken of Sarah's disappearance, the way he had manipulated everything. Marcus had warned him, too, you're not ready for what you'll find. But Michael had no choice. He had already stepped into this darkness, and there was no turning back. He needed to find Amara. The problem was, he didn't know where to start. Marcus was the key, but Marcus had his own hidden agenda, and whatever he'd done to Sarah had left deep scars, scars that Michael had only just begun to understand. But then, the text buzzed. It was a message from Jake. I found her. Michael's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. His heart was beating louder now, pounding in his chest. He stared at the words, the weight of them sinking in. He had found her. Jake's next message came through, along with an address. She's staying with someone. A woman named Lila. I don't have much information, but she's the only one who might know where Amara is hiding. Michael didn't waste another second. He grabbed his coat, the urgency coursing through him. The adrenaline from the text coursed through his veins, pulling him toward action. He didn't think about the risks, didn't think about what might happen next. He just knew that he had to get to Amara before anyone else did. The car ride to the address was agonizingly quiet, filled with thoughts of the girl he barely knew. Amara, the niece he had never met, whose life had been shaped by abandonment, by pain, by neglect. She had been alone for so long. And now, Michael was the one who had to make sure she wasn't alone anymore. The apartment complex was old, the building appearing forgotten by time. The dim streetlights flickered above him as he parked, the sound of his engine fading into the night. It was a far cry from his world of penthouses, private jets, and well-maintained mansions. This was a place where survival mattered more than appearances. He stepped out of the car and made his way to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway inside was narrow and cluttered with forgotten items, the smell of old wood and mildew lingering in the air. It didn't feel like home. It didn't feel safe. But it was where Amara had found shelter, where she had run to when she had nowhere else to turn. Michael knocked on the door of Lila's apartment. His hand trembled slightly as he raised it, but he steadied himself. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman in her mid-30s. Her eyes were cautious, but there was a warmth behind them that made Michael relax, just slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but strong. "I'm looking for Amara," Michael said quickly, trying to suppress the urgency in his voice. "Is she here?" Lila's face softened, her eyes darting toward the interior of the apartment. She glanced back at Michael, clearly conflicted. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. "She's in her room," Lila said, her voice almost a whisper. "But I don't know if she's ready to see you." Michael hesitated, but only for a moment. "I have to try." Lila nodded, her expression unreadable. She led him down the narrow hallway to a small door at the end, knocking lightly before opening it. Inside, Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her back to the door. She was small, but there was an undeniable strength in the way she held herself, even as she hunched over slightly, as if the weight of the world had already made itself too familiar to her. She didn't turn when the door opened. She didn't acknowledge Michael's presence immediately. "Amara?" Michael's voice was soft but steady. He didn't know what to say to her. How could he, when everything about her life had been built on broken promises and isolation? Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. She just sat there, motionless. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words, with things left unsaid. "Amara, I know what you're thinking, but I'm here to help. I'm your uncle, and I—" Before he could finish, Amara cut him off, her voice low but sharp. "You're just like them." The words hit him hard, but Michael didn't back away. "What do you mean?" She turned slightly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "You all come in, pretending you care. But then you disappear. You don't understand. None of you do." Michael stood still, the weight of her words sinking in. She had been abandoned. Left to fight. He could feel the guilt gnawing at him, but he didn't let it control him. Not now. Not when she needed him most. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." He moved closer, his voice filled with sincerity. "I've made mistakes. But I won't make the same ones again. I'm here for you. And I'll help you, whatever it takes." Amara's eyes softened, just a fraction. She didn't say anything, but the flicker of hope in her gaze was enough to convince Michael that he had made the right choice. It wasn't too late. He could still fix this. What would you do if you were Michael, meeting a niece who has been hurt by family you never even knew existed? Would you walk away or step up? Let me know where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. The following days were a blur for Michael. He spent hours at the apartment with Amara, trying to make sense of her story, but each conversation felt like stepping into a labyrinth, each corner revealing more confusion and pain. Amara had opened up more to him, but only in small increments. He could see the walls she had built around herself, walls that had been constructed to protect her from the very people who should have loved her. Her trust in him was tentative, and Michael knew he had to earn it, not just by words, but by actions. He knew Amara was still wary, still reluctant to accept that anyone would come through for her. The hurt ran deep. It wasn't just the abandonment by her mother. It was the system that had failed her time and again. It was the indifference of the world around her that had made survival a daily struggle. Michael couldn't ignore the guilt gnawing at him. His life had been cushioned by privilege, a world where he could have everything handed to him with the snap of a finger. But Amara? She'd fought tooth and nail for every scrap of existence she had. She had been failed by her mother. By the system. And, now, Michael realized, she had been failed by him, too. The following afternoon, Michael was sitting at his desk, the weight of his thoughts pulling him down, when he got the call. It was Jake. "Michael, you need to get over to the East End warehouse. It's about Marcus. I've found something." Michael's pulse quickened. Marcus. The man who had haunted his sister's past and, by extension, his own. He had been a shadow lurking in the distance, a threat he hadn't fully understood until now. But the more he learned, the more dangerous Marcus seemed to become. Michael grabbed his coat, slinging it over his shoulder, and made his way out the door. He didn't have time to question whether he was ready for what was waiting for him. He had made the decision to see this through. To protect Amara. To get the truth. And no matter the cost, he wasn't turning back now. The East End warehouse was situated in a desolate part of the city. The area was run down, with abandoned buildings and crumbling infrastructure that gave it a sinister air. As Michael parked his car, he could feel the tension coiling in his stomach. Something was off. He could sense it, the same way a predator could sense the presence of danger. Jake was already waiting by the entrance when Michael arrived. His face was grim, and he didn't waste any time. "It's bad, Michael. I don't know how to say this, but we've got a bigger problem than Marcus." Michael's heart raced. He followed Jake into the warehouse, where the damp smell of mold and decay lingered in the air. The room was empty, save for a few scattered crates and discarded furniture. Jake led him to the back corner of the room, where a small, makeshift office had been set up. It looked out of place in the dilapidated space. "What's going on, Jake? What have you found?" Michael asked, his voice tight with urgency. Jake pulled out a folder, flipping it open to reveal a set of documents. The names, the addresses, they were all familiar, but there was something strange about the way they were connected. He pointed to a name at the top of the first page. "This is Sarah's old attorney. His name is Alan Westbrook. He was involved in Sarah's legal battles. But here's the kicker, he's connected to Marcus. He's been working with him for years, ****. Michael felt a chill run through him. Sarah's attorney? How could he not have known this? Westbrook? What's his connection to Marcus? Michael asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. Jake leaned forward, his voice low. I dug deeper. Westbrook's name has been linked to a lot of shady deals, money laundering, corrupt dealings. But there's something more. He's been providing legal protection for Marcus for a long time. I think he's the one who kept Marcus from being exposed. He helped him cover his tracks. The implications of what Jake was saying hit Michael hard. Sarah had been involved in something far darker than he had ever realized. She had been entangled with Marcus in a way he hadn't understood. And Amara, she had been caught in the middle of it all, left behind as the pieces of a broken family fell apart. Where do we go from here? Michael asked, his mind racing. What do we do next? Jake's eyes met his. We go after Westbrook. He's the key to everything. If we can expose him, we can take down Marcus. It's the only way to put an end to this. Michael clenched his fists. The plan was clear, but the path ahead was treacherous. Westbrook wasn't just an attorney, he was a puppet master, pulling strings from behind the scenes, protecting Marcus's interests. But Michael wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. Let's do it. Michael's voice was steady now, resolved. We take him down. And we make sure Marcus can't hurt anyone else. Jake nodded, a grim determination settling in his expression. I'll handle the logistics. We'll get everything we need to bring him down. Michael turned toward the exit, his thoughts focused entirely on the task ahead. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but there was one more thing he had to do. He had to find Amara. He had to tell her that he was finally doing something for her, that she wasn't alone anymore. What would you do if you found out your family's secrets were far darker than you could have ever imagined? Would you risk everything to uncover the truth, or would you walk away? Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. As Michael stepped into the car, his mind buzzed with the weight of everything he had learned. He was so close now. Marcus. Westbrook. They were the key to freeing Amara from the chains of her past. But the road ahead was fraught with danger, and Michael had no illusions about what he was about to face. The city seemed smaller now, the weight of his family's secrets pressing down on him with every passing second. He wasn't sure how much longer he could stay in the shadows, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let Marcus or anyone else keep him from saving Amara. He had come too far to back down now. The night was darker than Michael had expected. The once familiar city skyline now felt distant, almost foreign, as if the buildings and streets he had spent his entire life navigating had transformed into something unrecognizable. The weight of everything he had learned about his family, about Marcus, and about the truth he was only beginning to uncover seemed to hang heavy in the air, making the evening feel colder than it really was. Michael parked his car outside a small, inconspicuous building tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. He wasn't sure why this place, this quiet, seemingly insignificant spot, was the one he had come to. But something told him this was the next step. It was a warehouse, run down and abandoned, much like the rest of the neighborhood. And yet, it was the kind of place that couldn't be ignored. The perfect cover for someone like Marcus. Stepping out of the car, Michael's boots hit the cracked pavement with a deliberate echo. He couldn't afford any hesitation now. He had already spent too much time being unsure, second-guessing everything. He had to face the truth about his family, about Sarah, and most of all, about Amara. His eyes scanned the surrounding area as he walked toward the building. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just the chill of the night, it was the quiet of a place that had been left behind. And yet, something told Michael that this warehouse wasn't as forgotten as it appeared. The door was cracked slightly, almost as if it had been waiting for him to arrive. He hesitated for only a moment before pushing it open. Inside, the air smelled of rust. He couldn't let Marcus keep controlling people from the shadows, especially not Amara. "If you want to stop Marcus," Luca said slowly, almost regretfully, "you're going to have to go through me first." The challenge hung in the air like a threat. Michael didn't flinch. He had faced much worse in his life, but nothing like this. Nothing like this war that had been silently waged within his family. This was personal. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Luca stood like a wall in front of Michael, but it wasn't just his physical presence that Michael had to face. It was the weight of everything they both represented, the conflict, the destruction, and the scars that had been left behind. "I'm not here to fight you, Luca," Michael said, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath it. "I'm here to put an end to this. You can help me, or you can get out of the way." Luca's gaze softened, just slightly, before he spoke again. "You don't know Marcus the way I do. He'll come for you. He's always watching. Always one step ahead. Then I'll be ready." Michael's response was swift, unwavering. "Now where is he?" Luca hesitated, his gaze lingering on Michael as though trying to decide whether to answer. Finally, he sighed, the weight of the situation sinking in. "You don't have much time. Marcus won't wait forever. But if you're serious about stopping him, you're going to need more than just your good intentions." Michael's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Luca's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's a safe house, hidden deep within the city. Marcus keeps it for his most trusted allies. If you want to find him, that's where you need to go. But be warned, Michael. This isn't going to be easy. Marcus doesn't lose." Michael felt his chest tighten. He didn't need to be told again how dangerous Marcus was. He had already seen enough to know that. But this was the only chance to stop him. The only way to protect Amara and set things right. Where is it? Michael demanded, his voice sharp now, ready to take action. Luca handed him a small piece of paper, his face grim. The address is on here. But you'll need to be careful. Marcus has eyes everywhere. Michael grabbed the paper, his fingers trembling. He didn't look at it immediately. He didn't need to. The final battle was close, and nothing was going to stop him from finishing what he had started. Thank you, Michael said curtly before turning on his heel and heading toward the door. Luca didn't stop him. He didn't say another word. And as Michael stepped out into the night, the weight of everything that had brought him here seemed to press down harder. But he wasn't backing down. What would you do if you had to face the demons of your past in order to protect your future? Would you go after the truth no matter the cost? Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the next part of the story. The address on the slip of paper was a haunting revelation. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he clutched it, the edges crumpled in his fist. He had reached the final leg of this twisted journey, finding Marcus, confronting the man who had orchestrated the destruction of his family, and finally breaking the cycle of lies, betrayal, and manipulation. As he stood at the edge of the Safe Houses Street, Michael felt his pulse quicken. This was the place where everything would change, for better or worse. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, tucked away in a corner of the city where the sounds of bustling life seemed distant and muffled. The streets were dimly lit, the darkness of the night casting shadows on the buildings around him. Every step felt deliberate. Marcus was here. And so was the truth. It was time to face them both. Michael approached the safe house, his footsteps echoing in the cold night air. He had no illusions about what lay inside. This wouldn't be a peaceful conversation. This would be a reckoning, a collision between the man he had been and the man he was about to become. There was no going back now. The door to the safe house stood in front of him, a simple, unassuming structure that appeared as inconspicuous as any other building on the block. But Michael knew better. Inside, behind these walls, were the answers he needed. And Marcus. Michael reached for the door handle and turned it, his breath shallow. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and the faint musk of the past. The dim lighting cast shadows that danced across the floor, making the room feel smaller, more claustrophobic. The walls, adorned with faded photographs and peeling wallpaper, felt like a museum of memories, a place where Marcus had built his empire of manipulation and control. Michael's gaze flicked over the room, taking in every detail, every piece of evidence that might hold a clue. And then he saw him. Marcus. Sitting at a small, polished desk in the far corner, the man looked up slowly, his eyes narrowing as he saw Michael step into the room. There was a calmness to him, a detached quality that Michael found unsettling. This was no ordinary criminal. This was a man who had built his life on deception, on controlling people like pieces in a game of chess. "I've been expecting you," Marcus said, his voice cool and measured. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He had come here for answers, but now that he was face to face with Marcus, the weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. Sarah. Amara. All of it, the destruction, the pain, had led to this moment. "You're the reason my sister is gone," Michael said, his voice low and steady, though the anger simmered beneath. "You're the reason Amara has had to suffer." Marcus didn't flinch. He simply leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "Sarah chose to leave, Michael. No one forced her." Michael's eyes burned with fury. "You think she just chose to disappear? You think she didn't have a reason?" Marcus's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "She chose her path, just like everyone does. You can't control your own family's decisions, Michael. Some people want to be left alone." Michael's fists clenched at his sides. "You're a liar." His voice cracked, the weight of everything he had learned pushing him to the brink. "You made her run. You twisted everything until she couldn't escape you. And now you think you can control her daughter. You're not going to get away with this. Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate. You don't understand, Michael. Amara was never a part of the plan. She was a complication. A mistake. You made her a victim, Michael shot back, stepping forward. You don't get to hide behind your lies any longer. I'm taking Amara out of here. You can't hurt her anymore. For the first time, Marcus's calm demeanor slipped slightly. His gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing with an intensity that made Michael's skin crawl. You think you can just waltz in here and take her away from me? His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. She belongs to me. I don't let people like you interfere with what's mine. Michael stepped closer, his chest heaving with the weight of everything he was feeling. He had been given a choice: turn away and let Marcus win, or fight back, no matter the cost. Amara is not yours, Marcus. She's mine now. And I will protect her, no matter what it takes. The tension in the room thickened. It was as if the air itself had become charged, a silent promise of the storm that was about to break. Marcus wasn't done yet, and neither was Michael. This wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about taking control of his family's fate, about saving Amara from a life of darkness. Marcus took a step forward, closing the distance between them. You don't have the strength to face me, Michael. You don't even understand the game you're playing. Michael's heart raced, but he didn't back down. Then teach me, he spat, his voice dripping with defiance. Teach me what it means to stop someone like you. Because I'm ready. I'm ready to end this. For a moment, Marcus seemed to pause, as if assessing Michael's words. Then, with a faint chuckle, he turned and walked toward the far corner of the room. You're out of your depth. But I'll give you a chance. Michael's instinct screamed at him to act, but he held his ground, his body tense and ready for anything. Marcus turned back, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling confidence. You'll find what you're looking for. But know this, Michael, you've already lost. The room felt like it was closing in around him. Michael's thoughts raced. Was this the final test? Was this where he had to make the ultimate choice between confronting Marcus or walking away? His pulse pounded in his ears as the gravity of the moment hit him. There was no walking away now. He had made a promise, to Amara, to Sarah, to himself, and he wasn't about to break it. What would you do if you were Michael, standing face to face with the man who had destroyed everything you knew? Would you fight, or would you turn away? Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to find out how this story ends. Marcus turned back, his face betraying no hint of fear. But Michael could see it now. He could see the cracks in the facade. Marcus was afraid. And for the first time, Michael knew he was on the verge of winning. He wasn't going to stop. Not until Amara was safe.